Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to Nutmegged, the podcast where a Yank and a Brit talk about the beautiful game from across the pond. I am Andrew, representing the Stars and Stripes, and we have Faisal holding down the crown for the UK in Dubai. How is life over there, my son?
Good. Yeah, really good. Thanks. Yeah, I'm enjoying the Euros at the moment, and we'll get into why in a second. And yeah, I'm really enjoying the stuff out here at the moment. Looking forward to getting stuck in some more football with yourself, man.
Yeah, man, right back at you. We do have a lot of good soccer happening around the globe. So we're going to be breaking down stuff happening in the Copa America. Then we're going to jump across the pond. We're going to be talking about stuff in the Euros, and then a few kind of behind the scenes stuff that's happening in the world of football, like some transfers and some drama happening in the MLS too. So a lot of different topics that we'll talk about today. But first, let's talk about the Euros. That's kind of the big conversation that everyone is having in world football right now. We have tomorrow, as of recording on July 10th, actually later today, we have England going up against the Netherlands. I know that's going to be a big game. We'll talk about that one in a little bit. But we do know one of the teams that will already be in the final. So we saw the match between France and Spain just happen. It was exciting. We knew it was going to be a good one. It's two of the heavy hitters. And we had talked last episode about how both of us are afraid of Spain because they're just looking so good. So let's talk about that game first and break down what that looked like. We saw the 2-1 win for Spain. What was your just initial reaction after seeing the match?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great match. I think it was one of my favorite matches so far of the Euros, just because it felt like two teams really at the top of their game. Just from an attacking perspective, it felt like it had everything. It was almost like the battle of the wingers. You had Dembele, you had Yamal, you had Nico Williams again, which was fantastic, and the left and the right as well, which is really great to kind of see. So it was kind of like young talent, and of course, you had Mbappe up front as well. So it was a very good game, just a very good game of football. I felt like there was. It was a bit of a different approach, I think, from France watching that game. They hadn't scored any goals in open play during that game, during all the previous games, and I think many people it felt like they leveled the playing field for this game. Anybody else would probably see this as probably Spain walkover, but it felt like because anything's possible with this France game and France team in particular, that was going to be France versus Spain in terms of an equal footing. But yeah, Spain really came out. And genuinely for me, and we'll get into this in a second as well, I don't see them not winning the Euros. That's my initial look at it. What was your take from the game? How did you enjoy it?
Yeah, anytime you get to watch the Spain team is just so exciting. You talked about some of the exciting players that they do have, and their squad is quite young as well. So that means that they're going to be pretty dangerous for years to come, I'm anticipating. Plus, of course, with Yamal just being 16 years of age, which is quite ridiculous, and being able to perform so well at such a high level in a competition like the Euros. So that's exciting. Overall, the match was a pretty good one. We anticipated fireworks to be going back and forth just because it was France versus Spain. But I'm not going to lie, I thought it was going to be a bit more intense than it actually was because you have such intense and high quality players in both of these squads. And before all of this was going down, I predicted France were going to make it into the final and actually win the whole thing, which obviously is not going to be the case now. I thought that because we saw the French team do so well in the World Cup just a couple years ago, and they really have the same squad. And it's so crazy because when they pull one player out because he's either aged out or just not performing as well, you plug in a new one who just replaces him at the same level, if not better. So I really think the depth for me is the reason why I selected France to do so well. And then the Spain side of things, I thought they would have a decent tournament, but I didn't predict them to do as well as they're doing and to just be able to steamroll opponents as much as they have, to be so comfortable, because they were a little bit of a question mark. So we know like the amazing Spain team that won the World Cup in like 2018 or whenever they had won with just all of their massive stars that were there. And then you saw the transition kind of happening, and it was a little rocky for Spain. And it was still kind of in that rocky period for me, at least. It definitely looked like they were on the upswing of figuring things out, but then finally getting to a spot where they have a new type of structure. They're playing a little bit of a different style than they have used to in the past with these two pacey wingers. And it's just exciting to watch. And I didn't know that this transition would happen so smoothly and so quickly. So they're actually, for me, the most exciting team, other than maybe Turkey as well, in this tournament. Both of those teams just have high-flying offenses. They actually go for games. They don't sit back, as opposed to like the USA, just as an example. So USA needed to win against Uruguay, and they were kind of relying on Bolivia also, maybe trying to get a result against Panama, so they weren't fully going for it, which as a U.S. men's national team fan, we'll talk about the Copa America later as well, but comparing that, like they should have gone for the game to try to win and not leave results up to other people. So in the Euros, it really was the two teams of Spain and Turkey for me that just went out and tried to win games, which was really exciting. So all of that to say, this big clash, I was expecting more. It's exciting in general because when two teams of this quality go up to each other, like you see some good stuff. Like we did see these good goals in this match, but I really was expecting more. And maybe that's just the fault of this tournament. We haven't seen a lot of like high flying action. It is what it is. But talk to me about some of the goals that happened in this game.
Yeah, I mean, before getting to goal, I just want to say I totally agree. I think Spain, no one really had them down as tournament favorites or even anywhere to get anywhere. And people, I think, probably put them as like quarters and see how they kind of panned out, but they've really come into their own. And just as I was saying in terms of how I don't see them losing, they are probably I think the only team that have beaten some of the biggest teams. So they've got Croatia, Italy, France, and Germany were beaten in this space. So like, I mean, if you're going to win a tournament, you're going to have to beat some of the big guns and some of the greatest teams. And they've really performed really well. So that kind of puts it into that space. But two key players in that space. Actually, I'm going to put down three key players in that. First, we'll start with the obvious one. I think not many people kind of speak a lot about, but it's fairly obvious. In that Man City team, Rodri was a key point. And in that Spain team, he's ticking over completely. You can see that control in the midfield is great. And every game you've put in, there's someone pulling the strings, and it's him. Also, we've got to shout obviously to Nico Williams. Amazing. Just the paciest, and some of those flicks he did in that game, some of the turning defenders inside out. I mean, him and Koundé had a great battle on the left-hand side, but it felt like he just had that initial pace, and it almost really overshadowed like Mbappe. Didn't really have his own kind of flair. Felt like Nico Williams just had it there, and of course Lamine Yamal, 16 years old. Let's repeat that: 16 years old. What were you doing at 16? That is the question everyone always asks themselves and always thinks. 16 years old. What were you doing? Insane. And that goal to equalize is. I mean, there's some goals, but to have the actual like courage to get the ball, to kind of shimmy the defender and just open your body out to left foot into the top corner is crazy. At that level, at that age, in that part of the tournament, when you're like 1-0 down, to just go, nah, let me take this. Let me see what I can do. And you've got other players more established. You've got Navas, who's 39, I think. For example, 38, 39.
Navas is actually older than Lamine Yamal's dad. That's wild.
Isn't it just the craziest thing? I was seeing loads of pictures about Yamal. I don't know if it's probably is true, of a baby Yamal and a Lionel Messi where he's like bathing.
Yeah, I've got the story for you. So let me break this down.
What is that?
It was some type of weird situation that Barcelona was doing back when Messi was at Barcelona. So I'm sure everyone has seen the picture around social media now. So like a baby infant Yamal is in the arms of, Messi. So Barcelona was trying to raise some funds for some type of nonprofit, like a UNICEF type of deal. And they were doing this calendar photo shoot event where the players were bringing in infants. I don't know why they were bathing them. That was a little weird part. I don't know why you don't just do a photo shoot piece, but they were doing that and then taking photos. So that is why Messi was holding Yamal, but now it's like going full circle. And that's like, seems to be when the powers transferred from Messi to Yamal. But yeah, pretty cool to see.
I mean, it's such a wild thing to think about, like how that is the case. I mean, I also saw Yamal. He's in the tunnel. I think he's like one of the sort of like the mascots coming on with the players for a Real Madrid game, and he's holding on to Sergio Ramos's hand to be leading essentially the team out. Again, it's just crazy story. I'm waiting for the Netflix on that one because that is going to be insane. And there's like clips of his dad like in the crowd when his son scored. Can you imagine having that feeling of seeing your 16-year-old son score? It must just be the craziest feeling. So it's special to see from like a football perspective to a young player of that level. It's almost like and when you had Mbappe on that pitch as well, it felt like there was almost like that young, the kind of the future and the present here. And perhaps, I mean, did you see? Here's my question: is there? I mean, it's too early. Guarantees only one tournament, but Mbappe versus Yamal right now. What? Who do you think is just on this tournament? I mean, it's a silly question, really, but like, do you think? Okay, I'll get my question for you. Does Yamal have a higher ceiling than Mbappe?
That's a tough question to answer, especially because I predicted this tournament to be the tournament where Mbappe really breaks out and owns it. That did not happen, obviously, as we've been seeing. And really, Yamal has had much of a better tournament as a 16-year-old compared to Mbappe being like 24. I don't even know what Mbappe's age is, but really just performing so much better and looking so much more clutch. I will add a caveat to that. That'll answer your question. Spain has just a better team in general. So I think that ultimately helps Yamal perform better because he has a better structure and teammates around him. Not necessarily saying that Spain has better players overall than France, but the way that they play and the structure that's been implemented has allowed them to be better. When you look at France, I know there have been some conversations about Deschamps, so the manager for France. Is he the right manager to organize the pieces that France have to be the most competitive? They have always been fairly competitive, but maybe you would argue that they would be competitive almost under any manager because they have that talent. So is Deschamps really the one to get the best out of them? I don't know. That's maybe a debate that some people can have. Maybe we can have that at some point as well. But I think that overall, objectively, starting from the ground up, Yamal has had the better tournament. So he is looking to hopefully bring that with him into his local campaign. So with Barcelona, which Mbappe, I'm curious to see how he will translate his not amazing form in this tournament to what he's going to be doing with Real Madrid. I don't know when it comes to ceiling, to be specific with your question, who has the bigger one, because I think it's still up in the air. Mbappe's still fairly young. And of course, Yamal is 16, about to turn 17. So I think that either of them have so much time left in their career that the ceilings are still open for both of them. And I think both ceilings are still just wherever they want to be. They both have the talent, the time, the structures in place around them at their clubs to be amazing. So I don't necessarily know if I would compare one ceiling versus the other. I think both have unlimited ceilings of where they could go. Do you have a specific answer for it yourself?
My initial thought was I think that Yamal has a high ceiling. I don't really think that. It's because at 16 years old, having arguably being the best player of the tournament at 16, in comparison, perhaps Mbappe is fairly consistent. Is a great player, one of the best of the world, but it just feels like in terms of where Yamal currently at, he's also at Barcelona already, right? So he's pretty much a starter at Barcelona. He has also been the star player at a tournament already. He's just 16. I feel like there's more potential for Yamal in that space. I also think at the moment with Mbappe, I sort of being in that kind of like striker, but then also moving to the left into the wing, and now he's at a new club. I feel like that will really unlock him. So I think that's what has really got going for him, is that Real Madrid move may increase his ceiling more and go, right, okay, cool, new football. Because I think he was stagnating at PSG. We all know it, right? There was a point where perhaps he felt like he was carrying PSG through trying to get Champions Leagues, nothing really else, because they had pretty much everything else covered. So it was kind of that. But Yamal is playing, I think, with an area of, do you know what? Barcelona they obviously want to be challenging, but there wasn't the ultimate goal to win the league, right? They were trying to play, obviously working in terms of their Champions League football, playing well at at any point. But Yamal's just kind of really just taking it, I think, a little bit. So right now, I see Yamal as maybe I'm just doing it as like a flash in the pan, and I've watched him play in this tournament and been like, wow, right? And maybe I'm just looking at it from a couple of games and on reflection, we'll see. But what can I say? One thing I wanted to say is I'm very excited for this La Liga matchup now of this Yamal versus Mbappe. Now, this is going to really be like great to see. So, yeah, I can't wait for the La Liga next year.
I agree. That matchup will be quite exciting. I know I do normally get stuck into like recency bias. So what you're talking about too, like seeing, hey man, he just performed. We've watched these so well over the last like 2, 3, 4 games. So it's exciting. And then saying, yeah, he's going to be so great. So I do think he will have a good career. The hardest part for any player that is going to be one of the great players just overall throughout their career is to be consistent. That is the hardest part. So when you get these greats like Messi, Ronaldo, it's because they've performed so consistently over time. So you think of like the Lampards, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, like all of these names have just continued to perform. Sure, there have been dips, but ultimately they just continue to perform so well over time. And I think the reason for me to say that the ceilings are still open for both of them to hit super high potentials is because Mbappe also started very young, but he has been fairly consistent overall at being a really good soccer player. So I think he already has that consistency DNA built into him, and he's been able to do that so consistently. So that's why I really think that he does have the potential to be better than Yamal. But then on the flip side, Yamal also has that potential too, because he's still so raw, but then has already shown us glimpses of what he can do at just 16 years old. So I really think that we have some exciting soccer to watch between both of them. So that's why it's exciting for me. So I don't really care who has the most potential. I'm ready to see it play out already. It's going to be quite exciting.
I'm just looking at some of these stats here, and it is pretty crazy. I mean, so 16, you take that into account, right? So he has become the youngest starter for Barcelona. So that was a given, right? He's the youngest player to record an assist, the youngest player to score for Barcelona and in La Liga, the youngest player to feature for Barcelona in an El Clasico, and the youngest player to score a brace in La Liga, and the first player to ever achieve this record under the age of 17. So, I mean, the bar is low there's not many 16-year-olds in his bracket, right? So we've got to put it into that space, right? But it's just the youngest player to be named in the starting lineup and the youngest player to play in a knockout phase. So it's just this amazing to kind of see. This is the sort of play we want to kind of see, but it also gives hopes for like people who like fathers who are, want to get their kids into football. Like that kid's 16 years old and the amount of development he's in, and he's in the Barcelona squad starting. One thing is, if you haven't seen his first goal for Spain, I think I remember seeing it maybe last year, I think a year ago. Check out the highlights of it. That game, his first goal he scored for Spain is incredible. Even better than the goal we've seen. It's amazing. So do check out his first goal for Spain before.
One thing that makes me a little bit nervous with Yamal is that he's had all of this experience so young. So we had this amazing U.S. men's national team player who came on when he was like 15 to play for DC United. His name was Freddie Adu. And I was super young at that point. So I was like around the same age as him. So I was following his career. I actually got to meet him, which was really cool. So he finished up playing on at home for the Columbus Crew against us, and the bus was parked like on the other side of the gate, and I was yelling, Freddie, and he actually came up to the gate and like talked with me. We took a picture. It was pretty cool. So Freddie, I do appreciate you. But the reason I bring him up to compare, so he did all of this stuff when he was super young, and he ended up going abroad as well, but he didn't end up having the best career and really ended up not being a star in general at all, even though everyone was touting him to be, and he was so young, simply because all of these experiences that he had ended up crushing him. He just couldn't handle all of it. And he's talked about it publicly too, like the difficulties he went through. So I'm just nervous just for Yamal a little bit as well, because he's having all of these crazy intense experiences. And now he's a public figure. There's no way of turning around from that. So I just hope that he is careful and he has a good support system around him so that he does end up using all of the potential that he does have. Yeah, because poor Freddie Adu missed out on a lot. My guy, miss you already. Let me talk us through these goals really quickly. And then I would like to talk about one of the goals specifically, Yamal's individually. So France get on the score sheet first. It's with Kolo Muani, another young, bright French player. Cross in from Mbappe, our dude, cutting in from the left side, ends up putting a nice ball to the back post, easily headed in by Kolo Muani. So that's nice. France off to a good start. Then when that happened, I was actually disappointed because I thought that when France score, all they're going to do then is just sit back and bunker, and it's going to be a tough game where Spain is just passing around a lot, trying to unlock the defense. Thankfully, that did not happen because like 12 minutes later, then Spain scores through our 16-year-old. So before I walk us through the goal, there's a little bit of drama that happened beforehand. So it was with Adrien Rabiot, so kind of like a French defensive midfielder. He was in some type of press conference a couple days before the match and ended up calling out Yamal unprovoked. So not really any reason for it. So here's the specific direct quote from Rabiot. Obviously, it could be difficult for him, talking about Yamal, to deal with a semifinal in a big tournament. It's up to us to put pressure on him and to take him out of his comfort zone. And to reach a final at the Euros, he needs to do more than he has done up until now. So kind of calling him out, like specifically, I think the question was like related to how to defend Yamal and then the wingers that Spain has. But then to specifically say he needs to do more than he has done up until now, bro, he's 16. Are you kidding me? Like to do anything like the bare minimum up until now has been awesome and exciting. And to get the experience that he has been great. So kind of weird for Rabiot to call him out, and Yamal has seen it. And then he posted a quote, Yamal did, on his Instagram of saying, like, just don't talk, wait until like you actually perform. So some type of quote like that to kind of respond to that. And then now Yamal's goal, he ends up going against Rabiot, kind of puts Rabiot in the mixer, does like a little cutback, so Rabiot ends up going to the side, and Yamal with his left foot pings it in, curls it around, keeper has no chance, outstretched full dive, goes off of like the upper 90 post and dings in. So a crazy goal. If you've not seen it, it's all over social media. You should go watch it. But the best part was he went up against Rabiot, shoved him to the side and scored him and let his game do the talking. And then when Yamal scores, he runs like in front of the camera and says, speak now, speak now. So in reference to Rabiot, really calling him out again for no reason. So yeah, what's your thought on Rabiot calling him out like that, just angering the beast?
I mean, it's always that time, isn't it? It's always a tournament of football. He's probably thinking, Yamal's got all the light. Let me just kind of say something here. It's a fumble, really, from Rabiot. I think there was a point where Man United were in for him, or we kind of needed him. It was between him and potentially Amrabat. And he ended up staying because I think his mom is his agent.
I think
if
so.
I remember correctly. And there was like a conversation with Man United and something anyway. So, but I think he's always been that sort of player that just talks a bit too much potentially, and kind of like is just trying to sort of like get into the sort of like players' faces and stuff. So it's nothing better than a 16-year-old to come out and just do that against you. It's refreshing to see. Sometimes you perhaps feel like you want to get caught in it. You perhaps go on social media and start mouthing off a bit, and we're going to beat you, etc. No, just I'm going to let my football do the talking, and he did. So crazy, and props to him.
I love to see it too. It's like a refreshing version of trash talking because it's usually just people yelling back and forth, but then ending up doing it against the guy that was starting the trash talk in general, and then to end the conversation by scoring a goal on him. It's just quite wonderful. Last, Spain ends up scoring, making it 2-1. That is the winner. Dani Olmo kind of actually puts his defender in the mixer as well. A couple little cutbacks and then pings it in on goal. I don't know if it was registered for him as a goal or not, but it was going to be on frame regardless, but it does take a deflection off and then goes in the back of the net. But I was actually impressed with Dani Olmo in this tournament. I always thought he was like a good, consistent player overall, but he's actually performed really well. And I think he just fits into this system so well. He's a good role player. And when you have the right pieces in place, as Spain does, and they are all functioning well, it makes those good players look even better. So that's ultimately what it has looked like. I want to have one last question for you on the Spain-France game. Then we'll talk about the game that you're very excited for later today, England versus Netherlands. But let me hear your comment just about the future direction of Mbappe and Yamal. So two of the biggest stars. We talked about how they both have potential to be amazing players, but now you kind of mentioned it as well. Mbappe starting off at Real Madrid, and then Yamal going to continue his career at Barcelona. What do you expect from them? Because again, I had Mbappe not with the best tournament. Yamal looks like he's on the upswing, had a very solid tournament. Where are you at with both these guys?
Yeah, as mentioned already, I think Mbappe, the potential kind of the him injuring his nose has kind of affected him in terms of getting into his flow of the game. That's what I personally feel. I felt there was almost like getting into the game, and that really stunted a lot. And that says a lot about the French team. If that is a lot where the goals are coming from, and when you've got an injury of that level where, if to be completely honest, if it wasn't a tournament, he would not be playing. Right, they'd look after him a bit, perhaps give him a couple of weeks, and then send him back in. But he's obviously playing with a mask on. That's uncomfortable. And then he's in the previous game against Spain. He takes off his mask and he's not wearing the mask anymore to try and to kind of feel a bit more. And I think he's becoming more of himself in that game. But I just didn't see it clicking really for him. So in his mind, and he's come out as well and say, "This is the Euros I wanted to win. Right, this is the tournament I wanted to win." To kind of show that there was that hunger there. Perhaps the media is saying that perhaps he wasn't hungry enough, or he got a bit lazy with it. But no, I think this is almost like a one-off for Mbappe. I think he will, with that Spain, with that, or the Real Madrid team around him. I'm just thinking about that Bellingham and Mbappe link up in that midfield, in that kind of strike up front. And I'm seeing him. I expect nothing less than one of his best seasons in Real Madrid when he first starts. I think it'd be a clean slate. I think it's such a refreshing thing for him to do. Go out from the PSG team to go to a brand new team, and team he's always wanted to go into. He will tear it up. And similar with Yamal, I think both of them now will. Yeah, I feel like, and this is it's almost like, I don't want to compare them because they're in their own spaces, but that Messi versus Ronaldo, that El Clasico feeling again is now going to be touted as that Mbappe versus Yamal situation, really. And I think with Yamal being 16, now being a starter for Barcelona, fresh start to the season, I feel like it's going to be a special season for both of them, and they're just going to make each other better. It's going to be one of those ones where, Messi, Ronaldo, etc. So, yeah, I'm excited.
I hope it plays out that way. So I'm going to probably say something a little controversial. My view on Mbappe almost feels a little bit stale at this point. And I don't know if that's maybe just because he was playing in Ligue 1 with PSG, and like it's just not as exciting to watch that. And the way that they perform always is with the caveat because the league is just not as strong. But I feel like he has almost wasted a couple of his prime years playing for PSG and not really accomplishing a ton, and showing up in tournaments and not really playing as the main piece. Or like when like a Messi for Argentina or Ronaldo for Portugal, like that they are the star figures. Even at this age, like it's still talked about how they are the big pieces for those teams. Of course, they have other solid, great players around them, but I just almost feel like Mbappe just doesn't have that same aura right now. And I think like what you had said, him going to Real Madrid is a clean slate, and for him to really prove himself in the world of football, because it just doesn't seem to me like he was on that pace to tap into his full potential. So I'm hoping that the Real Madrid situation is what really propels him to the next level of being consistent for his national team and for his domestic team, going up against actual more intense competition. We shall see. I'm excited to watch. Now, let's talk about two teams that still need to play yet today to try to book their spot in the final of the Euros. Of course, it's England versus the Netherlands. Now, I'm very curious to hear your take on England after they do sneak through on penalties. Not something England maybe are known for, but end up getting it done. So talk us through your current vibes as an English fan going up against the Netherlands.
It's a difficult one because I feel my view hasn't changed. I feel like we have really sneaked every single game so far in this tournament. that first 20 minutes of the Switzerland game is probably our best we've played, and that's because we've had three at the back. So I'm hoping Southgate stays with that, but I still feel there's just another gear that can be with this England team, and if it isn't tonight, then I don't know when it's going to be. I honestly don't. I feel like, I mean, you've watched it as well, and most people are saying it, and Southgate knows it, and the team knows it. It's not been their best tournament yet. Yes, we're here, right? We're in the semi-finals of the tournament. Is that maybe because we've kind of got lucky with the side of the draw we're at? If you think about what Spain have done to get to where they are today, and what England have done, and how in which they've kind of got to that point, it is like night and day, really. England's tournament and Spain's tournament have been two very different tournaments, and I would be slightly, I mean, I'd say this now, but I mean, obviously I would love England to win the Euros, but you'd be disappointed for Spain if they didn't win it, just because of how much they've battled to get to where they are today in this tournament. But yeah, I'm not massively confident. My view hasn't changed. I'm still very much the case of my prediction would be a case if we do this again, it would be like I said, we would sneak in. I would love to be completely like out of the water. England performance, somehow something clicks, but something tells me it's also going to be another very nervous game, very low scoring game. And potentially England may sneak it. But I would say probably goes towards Netherlands. They've actually not had to play overtime, which is a big one. We've had 2 overtimes in the past 2 games. We're looking tired. We've had, it's just, it feels like from like a game, from like a team perspective, they seem a little bit fresher. They've actually had goals go in. They've got Gakpo's actually scored more than 1 goal, which is great to see right from open play. They've put some solid performances against that Turkey team, which was a very good team. And England have really sneaked in against Switzerland and Slovenia, Slovakia. And it's been a bit of like we'll just get through and take it a game at a time. So not confident. I would love to when we record this, our next episode, to be like England Euro champions. But initial thought is very, very unlikely at the moment.
I think the key piece you talked about is Spain's tournament to get to where they are has been so different because they've been so dominant compared to England, where they're just kind of squeaking through each round. And it is so wild because if you look at it on paper, in terms of talent, England should be performing well. I saw this thing, I think, on Instagram where they were kind of calling out Southgate and saying only Southgate could have this type of tournament where he has the Premier League player of the year. There's like the Italian player of the year, something as well. And then another player from Spain that was like voted player of the year, something like that. So like 3 players of the year, and it's still just a struggle to get to where they are. So I think that is quite funny. I am always nervous when it comes to the Netherlands because they're not as consistent. However, they're always around. At least that's the feeling I get as a USA member, a fan, because we end up getting knocked out of the World Cup by the Netherlands. They're always just a tough team to play against because they always have the talent to make something happen. And they had a fairly decent tournament, and you kind of talked about how they've been performing as of late as well. They have some star power up top, and it is just exciting to watch them play. For the most part, it has been kind of hit or miss, actually, in this tournament. They haven't been, like I talked about, a Spain or a Turkey. Those 2 teams really just high-flying. They're going for games. You'll either get that sometimes with the Netherlands, but then other times they're okay to just sit back and play a little bit more scrappy. So I'm curious to see what version we'll get against England. So we know England are much more conservative playing under Southgate. So that would make me think that in the initial start, Netherlands would try to go for it. And then if they are able to score, sit back, kind of how I anticipated it to be with France. So once they score a goal, then sit back and then let England do their thing, because they know, again, England will play conservative overall. So then if you can go out, you can score a goal early, you know what the game plan will be for England. So then why not just sit back and relax? Talk to me what you think the lineup will be for England, especially when it comes to Harry Kane. So Harry Kane got substituted out before penalties happened. I heard some analysts talking about how he was limping and just hasn't looked fully in form in this entire tournament. So some people are saying that there has been some type of injury that he had or some knock that he's been carrying and just hasn't been at full power. So I'm curious why he is end up continued to play when you have the likes of Ivan Toney around to be able to maybe play at full form. Yeah, what's your thought on lineups and what it's going to look like?
I mean, you cannot drop Harry Kane. It's more from the fact of what he potentially can do than what he's currently not doing now. If you need a goal at any point, I feel like Harry Kane's always going to be that place. He's our captain, star striker. So I feel like whatever form he's in, I feel like 60-70% Harry Kane is probably going to potentially nick you more of a goal than any other striker we've had. Don't get me wrong. I think Watkins and I think they're two very different players. Right, Watkins has been bought in for that running behind the lines, and we saw that in the previous games. He was kind of bought in. We obviously have Ivan Toney, who's the way he held that ball up again that Slovenia game was fantastic. So those are the type of players, and Harry Kane feels more of an all-rounder, right? So he's more like hold the ball up. He's definitely dropping back a bit more, but he does feel like he's lost a few yards in his pace a little bit, and perhaps he isn't as sharp as he's perhaps previously been in other tournaments, and perhaps for Bayern Munich as well. So I feel like you have to keep him in. I would definitely start with the back three again. There's no two ways about it. We were definitely more attacking. I think we need to stick perhaps move out Trippier, put in Luke Shaw, because now he's fully fit and he was great when he came on. So you probably want to keep to similar style you've kind of got with that Stones at the back, for example. Konza I thought was amazing. Konza, Stones, and you want to keep your Kyle Walker in that midfield. There's no way you're not in defense. There's no way you don't want to keep. You've got to start Kobbie Mainoo, because arguably one of England's best players, most consistent best players we've had in this tournament so far. I reckon you swap out Trippier, bring in Luke Shaw. On the right hand side, you're keeping in who we got on the right hand side? It's escaped me.
You're talking right wing, Saka.
Yeah, that's of course the one and only. So you've got to keep that in. Obviously, keep Harry Kane and Jude Bellingham with Rice. I think you've got to keep that space in. We're getting some buildable consistency. We're building something with that sort of team. So that's the players I would swap out and keep that sort of space in. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting game. I think the squads will match up. One thing I do want to flag about Denmark, Netherlands, is this kind of Nathan Ake, we know how good he is for City. The big Virgil van Dijk. So it's not going to be an easy one. I think there was definitely players in there who were thinking perhaps that. Yeah, I think Trent Alexander-Arnold said that Virgil would prefer if Harry Kane didn't play, because he's going to have problems with Harry Kane, right? So there's that space. But and obviously you've got Memphis Depay, who Man United fans felt like he didn't perform as well, but we know he's got goals in him. Right, the sort of player he is. There's going to be performances and there's going to be goals in that squad. Weghorst, we know quite well. He can nick a goal in every now and then. So there's definitely players in there that are scary. Maybe it's not the levels of like Van Persie and Schneider, for example. That kind of team with the diving header, right? Everyone remembers that leaping header from Robin Van Persie. But I still think Ronald Koeman's created a really solid squad here. I think there'll be goals in this game, but I just don't feel it's gonna be a very nervy game for both sides. But yeah, should be a good performance overall from both teams.
Yeah, it should be a good match, and kind of like what we talked about with the France-Spain match, like it should be exciting. However, I think now the state of soccer is teams are almost more scared to lose than they are inspired to win, because they would rather sit back and then try to nick a goal as opposed to trying to go for it and win and then leave themselves a little bit open in the back. So I'm a little bit nervous it'll end up being that type of game, especially with Southgate, knowing he is just such a conservative type of coach. So we'll have to see what that looks like. But I'm going to throw you something real quick. I'm going to give you the minutes played of all the players on England. And I'm curious to hear if you would think that any of these players should have played more or if any will have played less. So I'll give you the list starting from the bottom with players who have not played a single minute all the way up to the top with, I think there were 3 players that have played every single minute. So we'll start at the bottom. This one was kind of expected. So no minutes. Dean Henderson, Aaron Ramsdale, 2 backup goalkeepers, makes sense. Adam Wharton, Joe Gomez, and Lewis Dunk, nothing at all. Anthony Gordon, 1 minute. Ollie Watkins, 20 minutes. Jared Bowen, 35 minutes. Ivan Toney, 41 minutes. Luke Shaw, 42 minutes. Ezri Konsa, 93 minutes. Eze, 99 minutes. Palmer, 115 minutes. Gallagher, 118. Trent Alexander-Arnold, 134. Kobe Mainu, 210. Mark Gahey, 390. Kieran Trippier, 408. Phil Foden, 453. Saka, 456. Harry Kane, 464. Bellingham, 491. And then players that have played all 510 minutes: Pickford, Stones, Rice, and Walker. With that laid out, is there anything that you would have adjusted if you were Southgate, or would have liked to seen Southgate do?
I think me and a lot of obviously the England fans would agree here that Anthony Gordon not really getting the game time he deserves is a massive travesty for this England squad, just because he's a sort of player that perhaps when Foden's been not really great, or we needed that pace on the left-hand side, I think that needed to have been. And I think every time I see him on the bench, I'm like, why is he not playing him more? Like, it just doesn't make sense for me. I just feel like it doesn't sit well with me because he's such a great player. And I think he'll definitely, like, what he's been doing at Newcastle has been fantastic. And I think he'll definitely take that back into the club. But I feel like this is a real missed opportunity. So that's for me, it's the first one. I think Cole Palmer, and we all know it as well, should have got more minutes. I think he may be a big difference potentially tonight if he gets an opportunity to play. I understand why he's not starting. You've got the likes of Saka and Foden. You cannot not play them. You cannot not start them. But again, it feels like there's a missed opportunity there as well. And then you've got to look at this, for example, the strikers in that space. They weren't necessarily not really get a look into the Harry Kane situation. Could he have perhaps did more of a balance and rested Kane on certain occasions? Yes, but we've not played like that. We've had no games that has allowed us to really swap out for midfielders or defenders, perhaps like Lewis Dunk would never going to get a chance, right? These players that perhaps, say you're playing like an equivalent potentially of like a Slovenia and has your 3-0 up. You can then bring on these sorts of players, right? But we've not had that. So you've got to almost kind of go, right, Southgate's looked at it and gone, let's just win this game. With the players I have at the moment, there's no consistency, let's just win this game. And he's tried to swap things out and it hasn't really worked out. So, I say right now, I say in Southgate we trust, but who knows, right? He's made some decisions that I've not really been not been happy with. The likes of Gordon and Cole Palmer not giving more minutes is clearly a big one for us. So, we'll see. Either way, this is, I would argue, probably Southgate's last tournament. If he wins it still, I think there'll be, it's very unlikely, but if he does, I still think there'll be question marks still, because we will squeak through to the next 2 games anyway. So unless something dramatic happens tonight and it's like a crazy all-out performance, then I think this is definitely Southgate's last game.
Yeah. If I was like a hardcore England fan, like I am for a USA fan, I would want him gone regardless of what the result would be, even if he wins the Euros, just because he's not utilizing the talent that's on the roster the way that it should be. Same with Berhalter and the U.S. men's national team. Like, we have talented players more so than we've ever had before, and we've not reached the heights that we have before. I talked about this last episode with Jurgen Klinsmann in like 2016 or something. He ended up getting out of a Copa group, which was more difficult, and he had mostly just MLS players. So quite a different world. But I get what you're saying with England. I wish them the best. I'm going to pitch you one last thing. But I will also agree with you. Anthony Gordon not even just getting a chance is crazy. And it took a little while for Palmer to even start getting minutes, which I thought was pretty wild after the incredible season that he had, essentially carrying Chelsea in the Premier League. I like Ollie Watkins a lot and what he brings. I think he deserved more minutes to at least try to make England do something else special. I also think Jared Bowen is such a cool player. I also have like a special place in his heart because he played at Hull City. So I'm a big fan of that. But I would have loved to seen the conservative Southgate try to do something a little crazy, which that is just contradictory. So I'm probably expecting something that I know would never have happened anyway, because I think it would have been nice to see more attacking threat be subbed in to see what they could do, because they've deserved it after the seasons that all of those guys have had. So my last thing to you, I'll let you say one last thing on England, but I also want to get a score prediction. What do you think will happen in today's match?
I knew this was coming. My prediction is, it's difficult because my heart says one thing and my head says another, if I'm honest. I'll give you both, right? My heart says England 2-1. That's what my heart says. And I think that's just because we've got it in us. And I think the spirit is there for us to try and score a goal and maybe score 2 goals and win the game. Yes, I think we'll be probably 1-0 down for a large amount of time and something perhaps will click in the 70th minute, but I still think it will probably potentially be 2-1, as my heart says. My head says, knowing how England play, I think it's probably 1-0 Netherlands, just because it's going to be a stale 0-0 back and forward. You know, maybe a couple of VAR decisions in this back and forward. And then it's going to be something silly, really silly, where we just give the ball away and it's just going to be really annoying. And it's just going to be like a flipping Weghorst goal in the 86th minute or something. It's just going to be really annoying. But that's what my initial thought is. That's what I said. My heart and my head is that I want to go in my heart just because, hey, you've got to.
Why not? Love it. I'll give you a prediction as well. I'll say 1-1 and then it goes to penalties. I'm curious to see how the penalty situation will play out. But I think Saka will actually get a goal in regular time. So that is my very specific prediction for the game. But we shall see coming at us very shortly. Now let's talk Copa America really quick because we're actually at the same exact stage in Copa America as we are with the Euros. We have one more team trying to get themselves into the final. So let me walk you through the quarterfinals of what happened very quickly. Argentina and Ecuador, actually Argentina making it through on penalties. So a little bit of a nervy showing there from the Argentinians. Then we had Venezuela going up against Canada, also going to penalties. And Canada, the North American crew, making it through with Jesse Marsch at the helm. A USA manager, also was slated, as we had talked about last time, to be the U.S. men's national team player, or U.S. men's national team head coach, but did not get selected, and talked about how the experience of the interview was not very good. So good to see Jesse Marsch doing well. Then we had Colombia absolutely slapping Panama 5-0, which really shows us where the USA kind of is, because we ended up not making it past Panama, and that's ultimately the reason we didn't get out of the group stage. Then we had Uruguay going up against Brazil, which not the most fun game, super scrappy, which is kind of what we anticipated after seeing Brazil's tournament, where they just have not done the joga bonita. They have been much more trying to foul, cause problems, and Uruguay doing even more of that than we did see with Brazil, just trying to slow them down with meaty fouls and tough challenges. So that ended up going 0-0 to penalties as well. So 3 of the 4 games ultimately going to penalties, and Uruguay making it through past Brazil. So we'll have to see what that means for Brazil, if they can kind of figure out their situation. They had a new manager kind of coming in, so I think he's still getting his footing, trying to figure all the situations out. Plus Neymar is a big piece of that team, was injured, so couldn't play. So a lot of different things that they'll need to get sorted out. Then we have gone into the semis. We already had one of those games played. It was Argentina versus Canada. You kind of knew what was going to happen there. Canada just not having the firepower to get through, end up losing 2-0 to Argentina. We are sad to see our neighbors up north go out as a USA fan, but Argentina making it through to the final. So we actually have a game today as well at 8 p.m. So a lot of good soccer happening today. So 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the England game. Then we have 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have Uruguay versus Colombia. Now that will be a fun game to watch. Bielsa, of course, the manager for Uruguay, doing good things. The way that he has this team structured is just super fun to watch, and they're exciting. So, of course, against a high-flying Colombia team who just slapped Panama 5-0, it's going to be a good matchup, seeing who will ultimately make it through to face Argentina in the final. And I know we've kind of talked about the balance between the Euros and the Copa. What has been the coverage like over there? Are you even kind of tuned in to what's happening with the Copa being over kind of on the European side of things?
Yeah, of course. We've obviously hear the big ones. Like I said last time, we definitely hear the Argentina. We hear the Messi penalty miss. We see the Messi golden open play, and like, okay, cool. At least he's scoring, for example. So, and he's doing a better tournament than what they argue against Ronaldo. There's always that comparison of like, I don't think Ronaldo scored right in this whole tournament. So, and potentially his last tournament. So there's always that comparison. Is always going to be there. So there's always that space. But what we've obviously seen is, I think, couple of things that kind of come out on social media, which is, I think we saw in Neymar, I think was he, I mean, this is all just social media, so we're not sure whether this is true or not, but crying in a nightclub potentially, which shows the passion he has for Brazil, which is obviously sad. And you think that Brazil perhaps something hasn't clicked for them in this tournament, and that perhaps they needed to perform better. And it's Brazil, right? Like, even people that are who watch European football and who follow the Euros will still always look out for a Brazil team. They always assume it's going to be a Brazil and Argentina final. There's always that background. Potentially, will that be the case? But I mean, it felt like fair enough. Like, Argentina were always going to get to that space. World Cup champions, if they can win the Copa America on top of that as well. I mean, talk about completing football, right? Like, it's just insane. And then what we've kind of picked out as well is obviously Colombia. We especially in England, we know a lot about Colombia in terms of the World Cup. We knew how they play. They're a solid team. Luis Diaz, I think you see on social media as well. Luis Diaz, there's his dad is watching as a fan, just in the stadium, and I think the quote with caption was like, he's getting sick of taking selfies with fans because he's famous in South, right? Everyone knows Luis Diaz, his dad now, and there's a picture of him. There's a video of him anyway, like a fan coming up and, you know, in a Liverpool top asking him to take a selfie, and he's like, I'm just trying to watch the game, like, let me just, and he just begrudgingly takes a selfie and carries on. So we see little clips of that, and I think it is really great to see. And I think personally, I feel there's probably going to be a Uruguay Argentina final, which from a neutral football perspective sounds like a very delicious matchup. Just the way Uruguay have played in this tournament, amazing. So I think that game will be really great to see. I actually don't think it will be. I think it's a fairly even matchup, that Uruguay based on form and Argentina with Messi they have. So excited to potentially see them if they get through that Colombia game. So looking forward to it. It's 4:00 here in Dubai, that game is. So I may have to catch the highlights. I would love to watch that. It's a game I always really enjoy watching. So the Copa America final is always quality football on show. But yeah, looking forward to seeing the highlights of that one.
And it's slated to be a pretty good final, ultimately, whoever gets through Uruguay or Colombia, because that matchup itself will be good. So a lot of good football coming our way between the Euros and the Copa. So good stuff to be watching out for coming your way very soon, within hours. So watch some good soccer, all of that happening very soon. Now, let's talk about a couple Premier League transfers that have been happening. So I'm going to flip it to you, but I'm going to say something that also is maybe a little bit controversial. Some of the transfers that have been happening early on, which we've seen quite a few, not a ton of high-flying names, but a lot of transfers happening. And it looks like some of them have been because of the financial restrictions that have been placed. So they are trying to offload some of the players so that they can bring in profits. So they're underneath the threshold of like the $401 million that Premier League teams are able to register on their books as a loss. If they register anything over that, then they get point deductions, as we saw with Everton. I think 401 million is the mark, but it could be something different. But there is that specific mark that they have to be underneath of. So we're talking transfers. What's it look like so far?
Yeah, this is quite almost shockingly, Man United are actually doing a bit of business, which doesn't seem right with the world if Man United are doing business early, but it also shows that we've obviously got our heads screwed on. We've got a bit more of our kind of the directors, the board is coming together, and they're perhaps going, let's start. And I've seen on social media again this new kind of Ten Hag branding of new era of Manchester United coming into play. Ruud van Nistelrooy in. And you've definitely got players who are swirling around. Before I get into the actual kind of meat of potential players coming in, we've just, I think it was just recently as well, that Donny van de Beek, $500,000, I'm assuming, or euros, essentially, to Girona. Not great, not good. Donny van de Beek, when we knew from his Ajax days, great player. And when he was brought in, originally Ten Hag wasn't there, and now he's brought in. We thought that Ten Hag would unlock Donny van de Beek, and unfortunately hasn't been. So that's obviously sad from a perspective of Man United bringing a player in for 30, 40 million, I think it was, and then selling on for 500,000. I mean, there's probably a 4 or 5 million either way, just from like a general perspective. But I feel like there's definitely here a massive loss Man United have taken in Donny van de Beek. So that's just kind of one thing that's coming out at the moment. We also obviously know Mason Greenwood. Will he? Won't he? Very up in the air at the moment. There's potential of him going to Marseille. I think he's almost agreed to it, but the Lord Mayor of Marseille has come out and said, look, we don't want him at our club. And very interesting for a mayor to come out and say that. Very interesting to kind of see. And De Zerbi, who is Marseille's manager, has almost kind of said, look, at the end of the day, if he becomes a player, I treat every player like my family. I will support them. Simple as that. So I think there's definitely going to be an interesting whether to see whether Mason Greenwood goes in that space, and that will be he's only got 1 year left in his contract, but it's probably he will be sold. So that'll be an interesting one to kind of see how that kind of pans out. With, I'm sure, like a 50% sell-on fee, right? Like, why wouldn't you? It's huge. You definitely got to cash on these players like this. As well as that, as well from a Man United perspective, there's a couple of players. Jared Braithwaite, which again, a great player, fantastic in the centre back position. So that'd be good for us to kind of get in if we can. Matthias de Ligt, which we had, I think there was that maybe a couple of years ago where he was going to stay, we're going to Bayern Munich, and when he was probably at his peak, and a De Ligt at peak was fantastic. Not really starting for Bayern as perhaps would have wanted, not having the most best time at Bayern Munich, has obviously considered that maybe he needs to look elsewhere. Is potentially kind of almost ready and kind of just agreed terms and is looking to kind of get settled in. So that'll be the next one, I think, for Manchester United. There's obviously Yoru as well, which is really great to see. I think he's a French La Liga player, which are really good. I think he apparently said that he was wants to go to Real Madrid, and then Man United were looking to pay more, and then his team's going, look, I think you need to really think about this Man United offer. And I think he's gone, okay, do you know what? I'll have a conversation. Let me think to Man United. So, and I think Real Madrid were in for him potentially, and also Arsenal. So that's always really, really good to kind of see. So Man United doing business fairly early, bit of a shocker, but really good to have Ten Hag with a strong pre-season and see how that kind of pans out to give him the best start possible. As well as that, there's obviously a few things kind of flying around, whether potentially there's some Saudi Arabian players going to Saudi Arabia as well. And Juventus is doing a few bits of business as well. I think I saw the other day the first couple transfer, Alicia Lehman and Douglas Luiz, I think it is, were the first couples transfer, both going from their respective teams. Both play for Aston Villa, I think, and now move to Juventus. So that's your low down, your top line of that. Any of them that you think, do you know what? That's a really good move?
I am sad for Donny van der Beek because I know that he actually enjoyed being at Manchester United. So he did send out a sorrowful message saying, hey, he enjoyed his time and he's going to miss being around. So it's interesting to see his time at Manchester United, but I think it's time for him to move on. I actually said this a year ago, he should be moved on. He has potential, so he needs to be somewhere where he can play regularly and can slowly develop and actually become a pretty solid player, because I think he can. So I'm glad to see that move happen. There are a couple other moves, actually, some of the bigger names, if you want to say that. So Silva, going from Chelsea to Fluminense, he's out. I mean, he's kind of aging out, but going back to a club, I think it's in Brazil. So going back to his home country, which makes sense. One of the big ones, Elise to Bayern, which I didn't love to see because they're one of the clubs like PSG. They just suck up all the talent and you just don't feel as excited when that happens. So I was a little disappointed, but that was most likely going to be happening. Even toward the end of the season, people were talking about that. So that one has ended up happening. So Elise going from Crystal Palace to Bayern. You already talked about Douglas Luiz going to Juventus, and Raya. So David Raya, keeper at Arsenal. He was actually on loan from Brentford, but now has made the official move. So he will be there with Arsenal. So I'm curious to see what happens with Ramsdale. Will Ramsdale be going out somewhere else? He, I think, is a great keeper. He's just not as consistent. So he's been up and down with his form. We'll see if he goes somewhere. Could maybe use a fresh start with David Raya coming in. as well. But those are some of the bigger transfers. We'll keep you posted as we see more off-season transfer stuff happening, especially as some of these bigger tournaments slow down and we see some of the more transfer action happening. I'm going to give you my take it or leave it. It involves Manchester United. Rashford will have a better Premier League season this next year than Saka. Take it or leave it.
Saka being compared to Rashford after the season Rashford's had it's a little bit insulting to Saka. It does feel a little bit rude. Will he have a better season? Oh, it's difficult. Rashford technically, I suppose, fresh, not playing in the Euros, so perhaps working on his fitness, getting ready to that point where he's getting more comfortable. This new era, Ten Hag, is that going to be potentially the one that unlocks Rashford? My initial thought, as we said, I think I can't see Saka not having a better season than Rashford. I think Rashford will have a good season, but there's no way Saka has a worse season than Rashford. I just feel like Arsenal at the moment are a solid squad. They're looking to bring in more players, and there is, I don't think, any sign of Arsenal really slowing down in the league next season. I think got too much momentum, and I think that'll really kick on for them. And I think Rashford will probably need to get back into fitness, and that might take him maybe half a season. So I don't see him having a better season than overall season than Saka. So I will leave that, I think.
Yeah,
am I leaving that? That's it. Yeah. So I think Saka will definitely have a better season than Marcus Rashford.
I'm going to take this. All right, here is my tin hat controversy reason as to why. So Rashford, great season 2 years ago. One of the best players in the Premier League. He has the potential to be able to do that. Things at Manchester United, not where they need to be yet, but they're trending in the right direction. And it looks like, so there was the rumors of Rashford transferring away, going somewhere else. It looks like now he's going to be staying and is going to be a corner piece of what the new organization at Manchester United is trying to build. So now he's going to be in a good place, and I think he's going to be happy. There is another element where he ended up doing something politically where he allowed some flats or this area that was just kind of destroyed and it was graffiti. It was causing issues for a lot of the youth in the area. It's going to be redeveloped now because of what Rashford was pushing for. So whenever Rashford ends up pushing for something like the meals that had happened previously for students that were out of school, whenever he gets something positive to happen, a positive change in the world of politics in England, he ends up having a pretty solid season. So I'm taking my weird conspiracy vibes here. He got something good to happen, so he's going to have a good season next year. I think Saka will also have a good season, so it's tough to say he's going to have a better season than Saka. I'm just using that more for a little bit of drama, but I do think that Rashford will have a solid season. And Saka, I think he has proved he is one of those players that is great because he can consistently perform at a top level. I'm just more so curious to see if Arsenal can continue to do that, because if Arsenal falls off a little bit, we have seen Saka go through some bumpy periods when it comes to his Arsenal career. So I think that could happen again this season, especially if Manchester United are in the hunt once again because they have their ducks in a row. So I'm going to actually take this one.
That's a very, very big tin hat you're wearing there, mate. I'll be honest. I think it's an interesting one. I like it. I like the positiveness, if I'm honest. I'd love to see it, because there are definitely times where I've been watching this England game thinking Rashford could have done something here. We need a Rashford-like player. So if he does for Manchester United, there's no way he wouldn't walk back into the England squad. So that's always going to be great for us. I think that's kind of what we've lacked a little bit. So
I think so too. But imagine a world where you have Saka and Rashford together, on both opposing wings. They're some of my favorite players because they're also good players off the pitch. They're just good people, and they're just such nice guys. I love that. So they're some of my favorite players. So I think that's why I put them together. Also, I'm taking it because I am a biased Manchester United fan.
And I'll give you before we get into our nutmeg of the week, I'm going to give you my take it or leave it. It's around the Euros and the Copa America. We know the teams are kind of been at it in terms of the Copa America, the Brazils, the Uruguays, Mexico being the USA, Canada. There's some great players, the great teams in there. And also the Euros, we know the likes of the Spains, the Italy, Croatia. We know the level of games, potentially the quality of the games hasn't perhaps been there. Do you think that the Copa America has been more competitive than the Euros?
That's a tough one. What do you mean by competitive? So I'll
competitive as in the Copa America has been more of a competitive tournament, shall we say? Let me flag that. More of a competitive tournament than perhaps the Euros has.
I would say that it's more exciting than the Euros has been, just because there's been more goals scored overall and the matches have been a little bit more exciting. I think it's because it's a little bit more raw soccer, as opposed to soccer that happens over in Europe is a little bit more refined. And it seems like I had talked about earlier in the episode too, a lot of the tactics have kind of now been aligned a bit more with conservative play styles, where teams are a little bit less likely to more go for games, as opposed to over in the Copa. We've seen a lot of teams that have really just put the pedal to the metal and tried to score goals and to try to win the game. So I don't know if I would say it was more competitive. I think it's a different type of competitive, because there have been a lot of games that it has been a slugfest going back and forth in Copa, and like good matchups, like even just the USA versus Uruguay, like it was a 1-0 result. So like it was a close game. It could have gone either way. Even when the USA played against Bolivia, it was 2-0. So like a competitive match, and a lot of those games have been that way. So it's definitely been competitive. When it comes to the European side, there have been a lot of competitive games as well. It's just been maybe a little bit less exciting when it comes to the competition, because a lot of teams have just bunkered down. But then when you look at the likes of, again, I'll just reference Spain and Turkey and even Austria in that mix, like they have been exciting as well. So actually, when I've talked through it a little bit, I think it's almost been quite comparable. So I don't know if I would say one has been more competitive than the other. If I would have to pick on competition alone, I would still probably say that the Euros is still more competitive if I'm just comparing the two individually in terms of like talent and team levels.
Yeah, I think the thing I was just going to flag obviously was the quality of players in both sides. I think they're both extremely quality. There's probably, I think there was a study, or there was some stats that came out in terms of the number of Premier League players in the Euros is obviously it's the highest, right? There's so many Premier League players in the Euros, so the quality of football is a bit different. But I agree. I think it's a lot more raw in the Copa America. It's more like out and out, and I really enjoy that. There are times in that Spain and France game where it was literally walking football. The defenders got it, and it's just kind of like looking up for a second. There's a gap, and maybe like the game almost like pauses. The players just stood still for a second, where they're looking to pick out a player, and it's like there just isn't that kind of zip there. But yeah, I think I'd agree. I think potentially that the Euros is probably more competitive, just because the quality of football from teams like you said, Austria, the likes of Hungary, not necessarily Hungary, Austria, Turkey, for example, even Georgia, like they've got one of the top goal scorers in that space. So yeah, I'd have to agree.
I think factually too, if you look at the rankings of the teams that are in both tournaments from like the general random FIFA rankings, which aren't really based on anything scientific, but if you would add, I think it was the 8 teams necessary or 6 teams to get to the same tournament structure that the Euros has, because Euros has more teams than the Copa does. So if you equal it out, you would have to go down to like the 179th FIFA ranked team to get enough teams to be a part of Copa. So yeah, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel. It's like Curacao or something like that. Like no disrespect to them, but you're just not a footballing nation. That is what it is. So then you would have to plug them in to the Copa to get to the same amount of teams. So it's just clearly different levels for where you're at.
Nice. So hit us with your nutmegged of the week as we close out this jam-packed Euros. Potentially our last Euros episode before next time we film, it will be all been over. So yeah, go for it.
We'll know the winners. We'll know the winners of the Euros and the Copa. So it'll be an interesting one to break down. So this is my nutmegged. It's just a kind of general MLS one. It's kind of goofy. So it's something that happens quite regularly. So I'm curious your take on this too. So it was Kansas City versus Dallas, and there was a throw-in that happened. It was late in the match. It ended up turning into a small brawl of sorts. So Paul Arriola, actually a U.S. men's national team player sometimes, he got the throw in for Dallas. He went to throw in the ball, but Basong, who is a player for Kansas City, like got in front of him and was like putting his hands up and like was spinning around, like just being weird and preventing him from throwing the ball in. So then Arriola just throws it at his face, smacks him in the face, which I get it. So like, there's this argument of like who was right, who was wrong. It's just kind of a general nutmeg overall, because I don't know if either player really did the worst thing. So I am more so annoyed by Basong, who is preventing the throw-in from happening. So then the result of this is Basong gets a red card, the dude that blocked the throw-in, and then Arriola gets a yellow card for throwing the ball at the dude's face. Now, if Area doesn't throw the ball at the face and he's just like, ref, what's up here? Like, come on. The red card is not going to be given to Basong. It may be just a yellow card. So then the act of Areola throwing the ball in at his face, only getting himself a yellow card, then allows the red card to be given to Basong. So it's just so tough because then Basong reacts and like shoulder checks Areola down. So it's just annoying to me that players will like put up their hands and try to prevent a throw-in from happening. And then the throw-in dude who throws it in and sometimes hits the player in the face, like that's happened multiple times, then is in trouble for doing that. Like he's not really the one doing anything wrong. So I just get frustrated by that. I think ultimately my frustration is with the rules of the game and how it's managed by referees because they don't stop that from happening or more so. But that's just my nutmeg overall because it's just a frustrating situation and just goofy too.
Yeah, I mean, that is silly. I'm not sure why he is trying to stop the throw in, but sometimes players get like that, right? Like it's almost like I'm not sure what 1 minute that was. Perhaps they're kind of laboring on, and you know, you just feel like you want to take it out a bit. So yeah, that is pretty funny. I like that one. I like that one. Just football semantics almost, right? Yep. Just football semantics. My one is linked actually to the Copa America. So we know what Drake is like. Drake obviously is the rapper Drake we're talking about here. He is known to put huge bets on big games and big matchups for in the world of sport. He's obviously got a sort of partnership with Stake, right? So obviously is doing a fair amount of stuff, and just put he screenshotted the bet that he put on Canada to beat Argentina, and I think it was like $300,000. I think he would have got like $2 or $3 million back. So like, I mean, it was very brave. I mean, it's probably stupid, but brave to kind of put that out there. And he's obviously betting against Argentina, and Argentina aren't fans of that. They obviously win 2-0. And then they put on quite a little cheeky post, which I loved. I think it's fantastic. So we know obviously that Kendrick Lamar and Drake are at it at the moment. They're at loggerheads at the moment, and Kendrick Lamar has put a song out called "Not Like Us," which again is it's a shout talking about Drake and how he's not part of us and that sort of part of the industry, and the Argentina team referenced that in a photo, an infographic, a photo they put out. The team crowded together, just like a group kind of like huddle, and the words "Not Like Us" written in the same way that Kendrick Lamar has written. So I think it's a really great response to that, knowing that Drake had basically bet on Argentina losing. It's silly enough, obviously, to Drake to do that, but also to lose a lot of money. So hey, there's some losers, there's some winners. Argentina winners in this one with their social media team. So and losers being Drake and stuff. So yeah, that's my number to loop.
To have that amount of money to just be able to blow on a bet would be so nice. Like imagine the money or the things you could do with that money, like with soccer. Oh my gosh, you could like help lift a team. You could develop a grassroots system in the US. It's just ridiculous. Drake, hit us up. We can help make that happen. But fam, we're out. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Before then, jump on our Instagram account at Nutmeg Podcast. Drop us a DM with your listener questions or take it or leave it submissions. Hopefully you're able to get on a pitch out there somewhere in the meantime. Just make sure you don't get nutmegged. Peace.
Peace, guys.